Robert Mason stood at the podium. His hands rested on the curved glass surface before him. Members of the assembly, his voice was professional and steady. I will not waste time repeating what you already know. Earth is dying. Our water supplies are vanishing faster than they can be replenished. Our atmosphere grows more toxic each year. Every 10th citizen is calling not for patience but for evacuation. Humanity needs time, allies, and the chance to rebuild on a stable world. The chamber's air shimmered with carefully tuned oxygen levels. It still felt stifling. He was a man who had spent his entire career trying to keep Earth tethered to dignity. For years, he had rehearsed this moment in his head, knowing that the day would come when Earth would have to ask the wider galaxy for help. For a brief moment, silence followed. The translation systems hummed softly, carrying his words into countless dialects. Robert continued, carefully measured. We do not ask for charity. We ask for recognition. Humanity has worked to maintain peace on our world, even under the weight of collapse. We seek partnership, perhaps even sanctuary, but most of all, we seek the chance to survive. A sharp, guttural laugh broke the stillness. It came from the Arvasian delegate, a towering figure with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed faintly red. He rose slowly, his voice booming across the chamber. Survival? You plead for scraps while drowning in your own waste. You speak of sanctuary while your world rots because you lack the discipline to protect it. Look around you, human. Every species here has preserved their planet. We are not fools who burn our nests. Ripples of laughter spread across the tiers. Some delegates tapped their claws against the railings, others hissed with mocking approval. Robert felt the heat rise in his chest, but he gripped the podium tighter, refusing to show anger. I was not finished speaking, he said evenly. The Arvasian tilted his head, a cruel smile forming. Then finish quickly before your world finishes itself. Karen Whitfield, seated at Robert's side, leaned forward, whispering sharply so only he could hear. They're not interested in solutions. They just want to humiliate us. Robert forced himself to stay calm. He drew a breath and looked back at the assembly. You mock us for our failures, yet none of you understand the cost of living on a world that still bleeds from its own history. Earth has endured wars, plagues, and disasters, and we continue to rise. Do not mistake our struggle for weakness. Another delegate, this one with a scaled, serpentine body, interrupted with a slithering laugh. Then perhaps you should prove your strength by surviving alone. The assembly is not a rescue shelter for every loud, dying species that stumbles to our doors. Robert's jaw tightened. He tried again. If you will not listen to the gravity of our situation, then at least. Enough, the Arvasian barked, cutting him off again. Your words are excuses. Your people consume, and now you cry for help. That is not diplomacy. That is begging. The chamber filled with laughter once more, sharper this time, echoing cruelly off the vaulted walls. Robert's throat tightened. He looked at their faces, those rows of sneering mouths and cold eyes, and something inside him shifted. The weight of his own words no longer felt like a plea. They felt like a test he was done taking. His voice dropped lower, calm, almost too calm. If your planet is so perfect, then let us live there. Make room. Move aside if you believe yourselves better custodians. Will you do that? The laughter faltered. A few delegates blinked, confused by the sudden sharpness in his tone. The Arvasian smile curled again, crueler than before. You dare demand our home? You cannot even care for your own, and you would poison ours as well. Humans truly are blind. Karen's eyes flicked to Robert, startled. She had known him for years, seen him bow his head under pressure and rise again with measured words, but this was different. His hands were no longer trembling on the podium. They were steady, his gaze unblinking, his voice firm. We asked to be heard, Robert said louder now, letting his voice fill the chamber. Instead you cut us off. You mock us, you laugh at us, you tell us what we are while refusing to listen to what we know. That is not dialogue. That is arrogance. And arrogance has consequences. A murmur spread among the delegates. Some shifted uneasily, sensing the weight behind his words. Others hissed in defiance. The Arvasian sneered. What will your consequences be, human? Another speech? Another empty and arrogant plea? Maybe you should beg more politely with a head down. Robert stared back at him, unflinching. He did not answer with words, not this time. He simply held the silence, letting the chamber feel its own noise collapse into unease. For the first time in that hall, it was not humanity that looked small. The footage spread faster than any carefully prepared broadcast ever could. Within hours, Robert Mason's plea, the mocking laughter of the alien delegates, and his sharp challenge about sharing their worlds were being replayed on every screen across Earth. In the cramped apartments of Chicago, in the desert towns of Nevada, in the rain-soaked streets of London, families gathered around screens with their jaws clenched. Some shook their heads in despair, others cursed, and many simply stared, unable to decide whether they felt shame, fury, or both. By the third day, the streets of major cities were filled with protests. One side carried signs demanding patience, diplomacy, and the continuation of peace talks. The other side shouted that Earth had been treated like dirt, that humanity's dignity was worth more than another failed compromise. The footage of the alien laughter played on repeat, and every time Robert's words were cut short, the crowd's anger grew sharper. Inside a secure underground complex beneath Geneva, the United Earth Council convened. The air was thick with tension and the metallic smell of recycled oxygen. Generals, scientists, and political leaders sat in a circle around a steel table. At the far end, Robert Mason and Karen Whitfield sat side by side, their faces drawn with exhaustion. General Marcus Harlan, broad-shouldered with graying hair cropped close to his scalp, slammed his palm against the table. They didn't just mock us. They silenced us. That's not a debate. That's domination. And if you think they won't do worse the next time, you're naive. A senator leaned forward, her voice sharp. So what are you suggesting? War with them? Look around, General. We can barely keep our cities from choking on their own smog. How the hell do you expect us to fight fleets that have been sailing the stars for centuries? Harlan didn't blink. We don't fight on their terms. We fight on ours. And we've been preparing. Karen narrowed her eyes. Preparing? Preparing what? The general tapped a control on the table. A holographic projection filled the room, casting pale blue light across the faces gathered there. It was a ship, vast and angular, nothing like the clumsy orbital carriers Earth had publicly shown in the past. Its hull was black, jagged, and bristling with emitters that seemed almost predatory. The silence that followed was heavy. Robert spoke first, his voice low. I thought that project was shut down 20 years ago. Harlan allowed himself a tight smile. That's what the Assembly thought too. We called it the Class Zero Initiative. A ship built in secret, under the oceans, far from alien scanners. Every scrap of alien wreckage we ever recovered, every piece of tech reverse engineered, every ounce of creativity from our engineers went into this. The ship is real. And it's ready. The room erupted into argument. Some shouted that deploying such a weapon would bring annihilation. Others insisted that humanity could not sit by while its dignity was shredded. Robert leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos spiral, and felt something twist in his chest. Karen touched his arm, speaking softly so only he could hear. You know what this means, don't you? If we bring that ship into the light, we're saying Earth will never bow again. Not once. Not ever. Robert's hand tightened into a fist against the table. He could still hear the echo of alien laughter in his head, sharp as knives. He had left that chamber humiliated, unable to finish a sentence without being mocked. He had felt powerless. But here, now, with the holographic ship hovering above the table, he felt something else. Resolve. That night, Robert stood alone in his quarters, staring at a feed from the streets of New York. A group of young men and women waved banners, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat, shouting up at the cameras. One voice carried above the rest. We don't care if we burn. We just want them to hear us. Robert turned off the feed and sat in silence. He thought of his daughter, who still lived in California, breathing in smoke-filled air every day. He thought of his late wife, who had died of lung disease years earlier, her lungs scarred by the poisoned atmosphere. He thought of all the voices on Earth, voices that had been cut short in that chamber just as his had. When Karen entered quietly a moment later, she found him still staring at the dark screen. You don't have to carry this alone, she said softly. Robert shook his head. It isn't just me. It's every person they silenced. Every family that had to swallow their pride because they were told to wait or beg or stay quiet. I won't let that happen again. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we'd better be ready for what comes after. 3 days later, the ocean floor off the coast of the Mariana Trench trembled. Cameras stationed on drones captured the impossible sight of a massive black structure rising from the depths, scattering waves that rolled for miles. The Class Zero warship, codenamed Resolute, broke the surface with a roar of water and metal, its hull gleaming under the gray sky. Entire coastlines lit up with people watching the broadcast, some cheering, some praying, some standing in awed silence. For the first time in history, Earth was no longer a planet begging for help. It was a planet with a weapon and a voice ready to be heard. The Resolute did not slip into space quietly. It tore into the black like a predator surfacing from deep water, its dark hull reflecting only fragments of starlight. On its bridge, Robert Mason stood with Karen at his side, his hands clasped behind his back. The crew moved with nervous efficiency, some still too young to comprehend what they were part of, others old enough to know exactly what was at stake. Every face carried the same mixture of fear and pride. General Harlan's voice carried from the command pit. Navigation, set course for the Orion trade lanes. They'll intercept us before we even cross into neutral space. Good. Let them. Robert exhaled slowly. We're not here to start a massacre. Remember that. Harlan gave him a dry look. Mercy is useful only if it's remembered. I'll make sure they never forget it. The ship's engines pulsed. Within hours, the Resolute was moving through sectors where Earth's ships had never been welcome. Warnings screamed through the comm channels. Alien fleets scrambled, their voices filled with the kind of forced authority that comes from sudden fear. Unregistered vessel, identify yourself immediately. Retreat to your designated sector or be destroyed. The bridge went quiet. The crew looked at Robert. He stepped forward to the comm panel, his voice steady, deliberate. This is Robert Mason speaking on behalf of Earth. We tried diplomacy. You refused it. We asked to be heard. You silenced us. So now we speak here. There was a pause. Then the alien voices returned, mocking, but with a slight tremor beneath the tone. Humans, always so dramatic. Your ship is an insult. Power it down before you regret it. Harlan smirked and gave the order. Weapons online. Target their engines, nothing more. A flash of light streaked from the Resolute's hull. In an instant, 3 alien cruisers drifted helplessly, their engines gone, weapons disabled, crews scrambling in panic but alive. The display was surgical. No lives lost, no debris, no planet shattered. Just overwhelming, undeniable precision. The bridge crew erupted in hushed exclamations. Some fists clenched with pride, others stared in stunned silence. Robert remained calm, watching the readings. Transmit again. This is humanity. This is restraint. Do not mistake it for weakness. For the first time, the alien channel fell silent. Later, in the officers' quarters, Robert sat across from Karen, their trays of untouched food between them. The hum of the ship filled the silence until Karen finally spoke. You know what they'll do now. They'll unite. They'll call us dangerous, unstable. They'll tell every world that Earth must be stopped before it spreads. Robert leaned back, rubbing at the bridge of his nose. His voice was tired, but his eyes were steady. They already believe that. What matters is that now they'll believe something else too. That cutting us off has a cost. That we won't sit quietly. Karen studied him, her voice softer. Do you think the people back home understand what you're carrying? You just drew a line that can't be erased. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched the stars drift past on the small viewport. Maybe they don't have to understand. Maybe it's enough that someone finally said it. On the other side of the galaxy, the assembly convened an emergency session. For the first time in centuries, their chambers were not filled with mockery but with raised voices of alarm. Holoscreens showed the disabled fleet drifting like crippled birds. The Arvasian delegate slammed his clawed hand against the railing. This is proof. Humanity is reckless, arrogant, and dangerous. They dare to build a weapon of this scale, hidden under our very noses. They must be destroyed before their defiance spreads. But another delegate, smaller and insectoid, hesitated. They had the chance to kill. They didn't. They showed restraint. That is not the act of recklessness. The chamber fractured. Some called for war, others whispered that humanity's voice, though sharp, might carry truths worth hearing. Robert's words echoed across a dozen alien broadcasts. This is humanity. This is restraint. Do not mistake it for weakness. On the Resolute's bridge, new transmissions poured in. Not of surrender, not of peace, but of fury. Fleets were mobilizing. Systems declared embargoes. The Alien Council released a galaxy-wide statement branding Earth a destabilizing force, a threat to order. Karen handed Robert the data pad with the transmission summary. Her voice was grim. They're painting us as monsters. Robert set the pad down without reading it. Good. Monsters are never ignored. The war did not begin with a declaration. It began with a blockade. Across the trade lanes, ships that once ignored Earth's convoys now moved to intercept them. Cargo freighters carrying medicine and food were seized or destroyed outright. Communications hubs went dark. Entire colonies, barely clinging to survival, found themselves cut off. The assembly had decided to make Earth an example, a warning to any other species who might dare to raise their voice. On the Resolute, the crew watched the news feeds with pale faces. Clips showed Earth cities rioting as supplies dwindled. Some screamed for vengeance, others cried for the government to back down before the planet starved. The tension inside the ship thickened until it pressed like gravity on every conversation. In the war room, General Harlan stabbed at the holographic display. They want to choke us into silence. We hit their fleets before they finish tightening the noose. Karen shook her head. If we strike too hard, we'll confirm everything they're saying about us. That humanity is unstable, dangerous, incapable of restraint. Robert leaned against the table, silent for a long moment. He remembered standing in the assembly, the way their laughter had rolled across him like a storm. He remembered his daughter coughing in California, his wife's final rasp of breath. His jaw tightened. They'll say we're monsters no matter what we do. So let's give them something to remember. The first major clash came at the twin suns of the Orion Belt. A coalition fleet of 30 ships moved to intercept the Resolute, believing sheer numbers would overwhelm Earth's lone warship. The twin stars blazed behind them, casting light across the battlefield, as if the universe itself wanted no shadows for what was about to happen. Enemy formation tightening, reported the tactical officer, his voice cracking with adrenaline. Robert stood at the center of the bridge, his hands gripping the railing. Open comms. The alien admiral's image flickered into view, reptilian features twisted in contempt. Earth vessel. You have trespassed too far. Surrender now, and your people will be allowed to crawl back to their dying planet in peace. Robert's response was calm, measured. You cut us off when we tried to speak. You mocked us when we begged. You silenced us when we asked for mercy. That will never happen again. Not in your lifetime. The alien sneered. Then you will burn. The fleet surged forward. The stars vanished behind walls of fire. Resolute's cannons roared, the shockwave reverberating through its massive hull. Precision strikes ripped through the blockade, tearing weapons from their mounts, splitting engines apart. Yet the swarm of enemy ships pressed closer, their numbers endless, their fury greater than fear. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. Sparks flew across consoles. Crew members shouted over each other. Shields dropped under the relentless barrage. Karen braced herself against the railing, shouting above the chaos. We can't take this much longer. General Harlan's face was set like stone. Push through. One more strike. Aim for their command vessel. The ship shuddered as another blast rocked the hull. Flames licked the edges of the engineering deck. Smoke choked the corridors. Yet the crew fought on, moving with a stubborn, almost desperate rhythm. On the comms, the alien admiral's voice returned, triumphant. You cannot win, human. You will die screaming, and your people will beg for silence. Robert's voice cut through, sharp as steel. No. It's you who will stay quiet. When humans are talking, you will listen. The words carried across the battlefield, translated into a dozen alien tongues. For a heartbeat, even the enemy paused. Then the Resolute unleashed its strike. A concentrated blast ripped through the alien command ship, not annihilating it but gutting its systems. Power died. Weapons fell silent. The fleet faltered, losing its coordination. The bridge of the Resolute erupted with cheers, but they were cut short as another barrage slammed into the hull. Half the ship's systems went dark. Fires raged unchecked. The Resolute drifted, limping, surrounded by enemies that still outnumbered it 20-1. Karen staggered to Robert's side, coughing through the smoke. We can't keep going. We're done. Robert's hand gripped the railing tighter, his face streaked with sweat and soot. He could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on the bridge, every ear listening for his words. He knew this was more than just a battle. It was the moment that would decide whether humanity would be remembered as beggars or as something else entirely. His voice was low, steady, carrying through the comms like a blade cutting through fog. This is the last time you will ever silence a human voice. Stay quiet when humans are talking. The order went through. Weapons charged for one final stand. The Resolute was burning. Fires raged through the engineering decks and every vent hissed with smoke. The ship's great hull groaned under the strain of so many impacts, metal bending as though it were tired of holding itself together. On the bridge, red warning lights pulsed, drowning every face in the same bloody glow. Karen coughed into her sleeve, her voice hoarse. We've lost secondary shields. Weapons are running hot. If we fire one more full volley, the core could blow. Robert Mason did not move from the command railing. He stood steady while the ship shook beneath him, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond. There, dozens of enemy ships encircled them, firing in relentless rhythm, trying to drown Earth's voice beneath fire and ash. General Harlan's face was streaked with sweat and soot. If we're going down, we're taking their flagship with us. Robert shook his head. His voice was calm, but his eyes were alive with something fierce. No, we don't just take their ship. We take their silence. Karen looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Robert turned, his expression sharpened by exhaustion and resolve. Bring the communication core online. Every relay, every frequency. I don't care if it burns the ship out. I want every world in this galaxy to hear us. The comms officer stared. Sir, if we overload the pulse generator, it'll fry half our systems. We'll be dead in the water. Robert nodded once. Then let's make sure our last words carry farther than their laughter ever did. The crew moved without hesitation. Fingers flew over scorched consoles, rerouting power, overriding safeties. The hum of the Resolute deepened, a low growl that resonated through the bones of everyone aboard. The alien admiral's voice cut through the comms again, dripping with scorn. You are surrounded, human. You have no future. When your ship is ash, your planet will crawl back into the dirt where it belongs. Robert stepped closer to the comm panel. His voice was quiet but carried like thunder. No, you've mistaken us from the start. We don't crawl. We don't beg. And when we speak, you will listen. The order was given. The Resolute fired not its weapons but its pulse. A blinding wave of energy surged outward, flooding every channel, every frequency, every comm relay across the stars. For a heartbeat, the galaxy froze. Screens flickered alive in homes, marketplaces, war rooms, and council chambers. Billions of beings, across thousands of worlds, saw Robert Mason's soot-streaked face appear before them. He spoke without hesitation, his words clear, sharp, unforgettable. Humanity came to you in weakness. We asked for help and you mocked us. We asked for mercy and you cut us off. So now hear this, we will never be silenced again. Not by you, not by anyone. We are humanity. We endure. And when humans are talking, you stay quiet. The message burned across the stars. Every species heard it. Every council chamber fell silent. The laughter that had once filled the assembly was gone, replaced by something they had never felt toward Earth before. Fear. Respect. Uneasy recognition. In the Orion Belt, the alien fleet faltered. Crews hesitated. Some ships powered down weapons, uncertain. Others broke formation, retreating into the dark. The command ship, its systems gutted, drifted helplessly. For the first time, the battlefield belonged not to numbers but to the voice of a single defiant world. On the Resolute, alarms still screamed. The ship's systems crackled and failed one by one. Flames licked at the bridge doors. Karen slumped into her chair, exhausted, eyes wet with both smoke and tears. We did it, she whispered. Robert remained standing, watching as the enemy ships peeled away, some retreating, others simply floating in stunned silence. His chest ached, not from wounds but from the weight of what he knew this moment meant. Humanity had bled to earn not victory but recognition. General Harlan gave a rare smile, weary but proud. They'll never forget this day. Robert's voice was softer now, almost to himself. Good. That's all we wanted. To be heard. The battle was not the end of the war. There would be more fights, more losses, more sacrifices. But the tide had shifted. The galaxy could no longer treat Earth as a planet of beggars, weak and desperate. They had seen what humans could build, what humans could endure, and above all, what humans would do when silenced. As the Resolute drifted in the quiet aftermath, Karen moved to Robert's side. The two of them stood at the viewport, watching Earth's blue light rise in the distance, fragile but unbroken. For the first time since the assembly, Robert allowed himself to smile. They will never cut us off again. And across the galaxy, in the silence that followed, no one dared to disagree.